Welcome back, y'all. This is the Bluechip Breakdown, and we're your host, Bull and P, joined by a very special guest, Harper, and he is the Executive Director of Personnel and Recruiting at South Florida. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So he was gracious enough to share some time with us to just open up everybody's eyes to how things look behind the scenes, because we talk so much about NIL, about general managers, about just the whole landscape of college football is changing drastically. So he's just a wealth of knowledge and information, and he's been at several different high end programs: LSU, Alabama, Vanderbilt. From coaching to front office type stuff. So he definitely knows what he's talking about. And as we're going through, y'all, I want y'all to understand this. Whenever we're asking him questions, his answers might not be, how he feels personally. We just want to know what's the temperature like, because these coaches talk, right? From different programs and all of that. They talk. So it's more about, what's the temperature like, I would say from coast to coast. So that's what we're looking at. Y'all, please do us a very big favor. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. My first question would be, number one, man. How is the weather down there in Tampa? Because listen, me and P, we are in the A. It's beautiful weather here now. Feels like I could go golfing. It's perfect, but it's nothing like being by that water. It's nothing like being in Florida. So tell us about South Florida, what y'all got going on, and how's the weather and all that good stuff.
Man, that's one question I get a good bit, and I tell people the weather's been like legit phenomenal. I think we had I think I woke up this morning and a couple raindrops on the ground. It kind of surprised me because I hadn't seen rain in a while. But
Living the
man,
dream, man.
no doubt, it's been sunny, man. Sunny, 80 degrees. Definitely been a bit hot for these early months, but man, the weather's been great. You guys kind of see it's kind of bright, man. I got a lot of lighting coming in here right now, so it's been good, man. The weather's awesome. I love the weather down here, man. Allows you to get outside, do a lot of stuff, so it's been great from that standpoint.
Yeah, cool. So
Awesome.
what's it like being with Coach Golesh? Because I mean, I'm a big time Tennessee fan. So Tennessee's offense was the best whenever Golesh was there, right? Like 2021, 2022, he had that thing humming. So what's it like getting to work firsthand with Alex Golesh every day?
No one doubt. I'm sure he appreciates you saying that. Getting to know the guy, I'm sure he'd appreciate that. But man, getting the opportunity to work with Coach Goes, I think has been phenomenal. One, I think the biggest thing for him that I've noticed is, man, he's a what you see what a lot of guys in his position, a lot of guys in this profession in general, man. But he's a very buttoned up guy. I think he has a forethought about a lot of things within his program. Total control and reigns over everything, but has employed such a phenomenal staff that he's able to trust so many people around him, which is like ultimately what you want to have as a head coach. You take on so many roles and responsibilities. I think it's very important that you're able to have people around you, one, to have your back, two, that are good at what they do and want to do a good job. And I think that's one thing that he really has on his staff is just a lot of people. He's hired a lot of people who want to do a good job and who have done a good job. So that's how they've seen the early success and will continue to see that success at a high level. I think he's like I say, he's a very organized person. I think he has a great personality with our players. A unique guy, allows people to be themselves. I think he's done a good job of really understanding this landscape, how this college football thing works, and how much relationships are, how important relationships really are from an on the field standpoint, off the field standpoint, in the community, around the country, just whatever it is. So he's hired some of the best coaches, some of the best people I've ever seen at building relationships. We've got guys on the staff like DeMarcus Van Dyke, who played at Miami, who's a phenomenal coach. Kevin Patrick, who's a Miami legend, we've got James Rowe, who's our DB coach, been around the country. Cody Burns on the offense side of the football, it was another like Alabama legend. And even you kind of swing through in the personnel ranks as well too, and you've got a lot of people who work in a lot of different places. Even myself who worked in multiple states, and things like that. So you look around from whether it's from the academics, front office, coaches, some of our younger coaches, man, everybody. He's done a good job of hiring people who are good at building relationships with these young men, which is ultimately extremely important. So I'd say that's one thing, getting to work with him is understanding that he does have an ideal of, man, we want to be able to work, we want to be able to have relationships with our players. And ultimately we want our relationship, our players to know that, hey man, we care about you far and far, like far and beyond like what we feel like you can do on the field for us. At the end of the day, we know it's a performance based industry. But
Mhm.
we do have that relationship with our players that they know they can come talk to us about a lot of different things outside of the game of football for sure.
Absolutely. Man, let me pick back off that. I know you talk about a lot about how Goldie, she brings in guys around him that can, relationship builders, like you said, guys from multiple states, and maybe recruiting ties play a factor into that. Can you talk a little bit about kind of like your hiring process, like not just your process, but maybe if you have any insight into how coaches are hired in general, like that hiring process in general? Because I'm just curious, like, how did you even find out about this opportunity? And then kind of what was that interview process like for you as well? And then like kind of like I said, kind of a bonus to that, if you can talk about how coaching searches work in general, if you know anything about that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd say for me, and I think I always like to say, man, I've been incredibly blessed. Also, I think I prepare extremely hard and put myself into a position to where when these opportunities do come, I'm prepared for them. And I've also, on the other side of it, I've had some luck as well. I've been blessed to have some connections that just aligned that maybe I didn't even know there was alignment there. And to me, that's been my just something I've had a ton of appreciation for. But I tell people all the time, man, network is everything. At the end of the day, networks and everything, and then doing a good job where you are. I always tell people, man, be where your feet are. That's always been my when I was coaching Division III football as a linebackers coach in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, years ago. I
Mhm.
was, man, you'd have thought I was the head coach for the Baltimore Ravens. Like I was that appreciative of that opportunity and the opportunity that I had. And for me, it was all about my development, my growth, being able to do something I loved. And, in that moment of doing it, I was the happiest man in America doing that job because it was the next opportunity I had. Somebody believed in me. I think we all work in this industry of sometimes trying to convince ourselves that we're good enough to do this or we're pushing to do that, or and I think so often where people mess up as they're looking to the right and to the left of them, like, hey, what's this man doing? Hey, what's this person doing? How can I get myself in that position? How can I get myself in position, instead of truly appreciating the opportunity they have in front of them and taking total advantage of it? And I think that's, for me, one thing that I've tried to do. And I think a lot of these opportunities that I've been able to have come about through, one, doing a good job, like I said, where I've been, building my name, building my network, and doing a good job. And once those new opportunities come and people are become very inquisitive about who I may be or what I may have done at a said place, once I'm able to build that connection, bridge that gap, have a conversation with them, they realize that, hey, that's a lot of like-mindedness there. They realize there's a thought of
Mhm.
growth there. They realize that, hey, here's someone who loves what they do, who's built the right way, who have the right stuff. It's no different than we were recruiting players at the end of the day. You look at it like you're I don't even like to say use the term checking boxes, but you look at someone, you're like, man, this kid has a lot of what we desire in like a football player. And at the end of the day, once you're able to connect with him and you build that connection, you're like, man, I want this kid to really be a part of my team. And it's the same, no difference on the side of this coaching thing as well. I think, especially for only early on, I'd say.
Mhm.
Uh, for the I'd say for on the coaching side of it, it's unique. It's extremely unique. A lot of times, you'll see athletic directors who may have had a previous relationship with a coach at a previous school who knew he was a good coach, want to hire him. You'll see athletic directors and search firms. Sometimes they're looking for a guy who's had a phenomenal offense. A guy like Coach Golesh, who's like, you kind of alluded to, who ran a phenomenal offense in Tennessee, understanding like what he want that philosophy to look like for his football team, for the university football team, seeking someone out like that, and also someone who not only is good at that, but also good at being what I like to call a CEO. being able to organize the entire group, being able to get an entire group, put them together, have that group going in one collective direction, have total control over the program, which is extremely important. I think sometimes you can trend too far in one direction or the other. So I think that's why I say, man, you can look at 130 whatever it is Division I programs, and there may be 130 different philosophies of how we think we should hire a guy, what we're looking for. We want a CEO, we want this, or we want that. Pete, me and you play for James Franklin. I don't know if anyone constitutes him as like an incredible offensive mind, but he talked about an incredible CEO of
Yeah.
what the guy was, and so
Mhm.
it's different. It's different types of coaches, man, and there's more than one way to be successful at the end of the day. So I've never really truly been the guy to knock anybody for like how they do it.
Mhm.
You do what works for you, and if you can ultimately find yourself being successful doing that, I think you've done a good job. And I think honing into your identity is the most important thing for sure.
Yeah, facts. So I
Most
also
definitely.
want to kind of transition some. I want to talk about NIL because this big house settlement is coming up, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of speculation on what that's going to look like. And what I'm going to do actually is we're going to bring this up, and we're going to take a look at it because there's a couple of key points here that I would like to look at. So with this house settlement, some of the big key points is number one, we are anticipating the $2.8 billion is going to be retroactively paid from
Mhm.
2016. And I don't know. I think that y'all might have just missed that, or maybe y'all still got it. Either way, the red that's supposed to be coming up. So that would be maybe $20.5 million a year for some institutions. Then the biggest, or not the biggest, but I guess maybe the biggest issue has been with the roster limits. So what's holding things up? It sounds like the judge doesn't like the language with these roster limits, and for football it would be 105. So Hart, what a normal football team is carrying what, like 120, 130 players, something like that.
Yeah, I think most you see is anywhere from 120, like 129, something like that. That's included walk-ons. Typically, it's 85 scholarship guys.
Yeah, so that's a big deal, right? So we're adding scholarships. It goes from 85 to potentially 105, but you're taking away a lot of these walk-on players. The judge didn't like that language, so they're trying to get that cleaned up. And then the other part of it that really stood out to me was with this NIL clearinghouse. So
Right.
we're waiting. It sounds like it might, might take a couple more months for them to get all the wording fixed and for the judge to sign off on it. But it should look something similar to this. But Harb, I just wanted to ask you, since you're in this industry, since you're rubbing elbows with all these different people, coaches, everything else, have you heard any insight on what this might look like? Because it does feel like this most recent transfer portal, it's been a lot of, players. It sounds like asking for more money. Sounds like people are, trying to pay the players more money. But have you heard any insights with how this revenue sharing and all that might look once everything is signed off on?
What's so intriguing about college football is everything's so transparent,
Mhm.
and it's almost like we live in a glass house, man. So I always tell people like, man, you guys may know more about this than me. And it's such an interesting deal, man. I think with the revenue sharing thing, one, you know, great opportunity for our student athletes. I think you've probably outlined it is just as much as the judge who's legislating this whole thing. It pretty much organized it, man. And I think that it's such a fluid deal
Yeah.
that nothing's really actually active yet, or the information that's been presented switches on a day-to-day basis, you know. And I think that's one thing that is unique about college football. There's also one thing that makes it tough because you're talking about something that's happening as we're doing it, which is always tough. There's typically some sort of a lead up period, which you will get within an aspect. You will get some sort of lead up period, but that's one thing that's so unique about college football is you see changes that happen, and it's like, hey, this is going to affect, same calendar year, or maybe 6 to 9 months away from like where you're doing. So that's very rare. Does in anyone's industry that something rolls out that's major, that's huge, that say, hey man, yeah, this is what we're going to switch to in 30 days, or 60 days or 90 days, whatever you may have it. And that's what makes college football so fluid. That's what makes it so fun, but also makes it extremely challenging because how do you navigate these things? Like how do you truly build a plan for the unknown? Is what I like to say. How do you build a plan for the unknown? But ultimately, at the end of the day, I think for us, it's been about one trying to get exactly button down the language, the what the situation may look like, or you may have it, how you feel like these things could ultimately affect your program, and you look at them, you say, okay, what's the effect on us as a long term, as a program, as a whole? And I think it's so hard to look at it from a multifaceted way at times, but I think you have to look at that as well. Like, if we can't do it this way, can we do it that way? If we can't do it that way, can we particularly do it this way? And looking at all these particular aspects and saying, okay, cool, let's put it together. Now you got a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, and you can sit there and feel like you feel good about all those things that may happen. And that way you don't sit around and you're have this huge concern about how this is truly going to affect our program, how this is going to drag our program down, or at the end of the day, how is another program going to maybe take that next step and now we're at a disadvantage. So I think for us, that's been the biggest thing, is just trying to get the understanding of like what this thing may look like cleared up, and just ultimately going from there. And so I think that's kind of truly been our focus as of late.
Yeah, cool. So I have a kind of like a, maybe it's kind of a follow up, but more of a segue, right? So with that being said, one of the things we've talked about a lot on this channel is general managers, because like you said, with things changing so rapidly, so drastically too, with college football over the past few years, it's been crazy. I think that you need a general manager type of a role. Now, would you say that your role is similar to a general manager, or would you say basically that you are the general manager?
I would say my role is like extremely similar to the general manager. What's unique about USF is we have what I like to call almost like a university GM.
Mhm.
And just because like I guess you've got a place like, just looking at this list here, like, Ohio State, who for per se, who has their general manager, who's probably the single guy. There's really no single figurehead. It really does this because truth be told, the head coach is as involved in this deal in some programs.
Mhm.
And there's some programs with head coach like, man, he is so far away from it. And that's how I was kind of talking about earlier. It's like, man, there's 131 ways to maybe do this thing. It's just you depend on how you want your program to look, how hands on, hands off you want it to be. Do you want an entire department doing it? You want one guy doing it? So here, I think the most unique thing is we have a guy who has a general manager title who oversees. He's our chief of staff who oversees that aspect of the football program. But when he has his general manager hat on, he's wearing that for the football program, the men's basketball program as well. So it's unique because he's working in multiple sports. And I worked there at Vanderbilt last year. Barton Simmons was actually the general manager, and the he was actually the football general manager, but Earl Bennett was superseding him as the athletic department's general manager. And Earl's working for everybody, working with everybody. Barton was directly football, so it's just he is still the football general manager. So it's just such a unique situation that how people choose to structure it out, and for whatever reason they may have it, but it can be done a lot of different ways.
So
All
what?
right.
So what is? So what is? So what is? So like so like I guess what is the general manager like? What is his job? I know he says it could be different, but like what is his job? Is his job to like is it more so evaluating the roster in terms of like you talked about kind of about Tennessee and Nico
Yeah.
situation? Would the GM be a guy that steps in and says this guy based on his production last season is not worth $4 million, or is he more of a guy that's is he out like looking at film? Like what typically is a general manager actually doing for a program?
Right. Unique, man. Unique question. Unique
Mhm.
question. I think I can tell you this example for sure. Worked with Aaron Joe who's a really good friend of mine, who played right guard at Georgia Tech. Who was actually their back in the day. Was actually their general manager last year over there at Georgia Tech. No, his job looks completely different than a guy like Brandon Jones, who is the general manager at Boise State. You know, I know that Brandon Jones, as general manager of Boise State, is over, obviously how he's overseeing the roster. He's overseeing movement of the roster. He's got, tons of people in the building working with him on these things. But he's overseeing all these aspects of the football program, personnel, recruiting, scouting, just the whole 9 yards, how things are structured out from whatever standpoint you may have it. That's kind of his role over at Boise State versus Aaron Joe. His role over there may be at Georgia when he was over there at Georgia Tech. He's no longer there, but when he was at Georgia Tech, his role may look similar, but also completely different. He may be overseeing a lot of those same aspects, but there also may be another entity within that building that's like, well, I'm the one who's maybe the determining factor upon these things. Is maybe you may have it from you know keeping people in the loop with rev share, whatever it may be. There's so many different unique ways. I think just like with anything, the general manager title has become like a highly sought after one because it allows for, to me, that ceiling of growth for you to bridge that ceiling of growth that you may feel like you need to take that extra jump. It also gives you ability to say, hey, I'm the guy managing the entire roster for this football program. I'm the guy managing the who's coming in, who may potentially be leaving out on a roster. And I think it gives people a lot of autonomy, and it gives people also a lot of growth and ability to say, hey, here's something I think I'm really good at that's really, really important for this football program. And I think that's why the general manager deal has become so unique. But it can be done a ton of ways. As myself as the executive director, my role is managing, tons of aspects in our football program. Maybe that's player personnel, roster numbers, roster limits, whatever it may be. Guys potentially leaving, managing guys who's running the transfer portal. Any type of anything that really touches our football program, social media, admissions. Literally, I could sit here and probably rattle off 50 things, man, that I have to sit here and really be the guy managing the person's process of doing it. But one thing I want to give complete credit to, man, is the team that I have at the end of the day of people who I like to say I work with. I don't tell anybody no one that works for me, but we all work ultimately for Coach Golesh, and we all ultimately work for USF football. But I think that the tremendous team that I have around me makes my job it's easy, man. At the end of the day, there are certain things. I think for me, I'm looking at it from a 50,000-foot view and having an awareness and a scope of all these things that are happening, how they need to get done, fit together from my philosophy, from ultimately coach's philosophy. But the people around me who are knee deep in their particular tasks on a day-to-day basis, they're extremely elite at what they do. I've been thoroughly impressed with the staff that we have here, especially the people that I work with on a day-to-day basis. I've been thoroughly impressed with how they work, their work ethic, their knowledge base of what they do, and like I said, their ideal and of wanting to do a good job. I think it's been extremely important as well.
Yeah. So I mean, that's something that people just don't understand how much how much goes into having a job like this. You know what I mean? There is a lot that definitely takes place that people just don't understand. But so this list that we just brought up, this is from USA Today. This is their preseason top 25. It's just one, but all the teams in white have a general manager. The teams that are in red don't have it. That's why I brought that up.
Okay.
And so next, this Hart, man, this is something that I put together for the viewers on this channel, just in how I would like for, like, let's just say if Tennessee was to go out and get a GM, and I know that you're not talking specifically about Tennessee, but that's what the goals are on that left side. It's just saying how I would want for that to look personally. So tell me if some of this stuff makes sense, if I'm off base in some of these places. So number one for me is that you got to know what the head coach's type is. Like, I think that you got to be the head coach's right-hand person. Number two, you have to ID the core players on your current roster. Three, you're going to ID the people who might be leaving. Like you said, people who might want to hit that portal. Four, obviously, you've got to ID future players. And then five, I think that you need to look at, and this was more for Tennessee, but maybe most institutions might be doing this without everything is changing. You got to look at how much you're paying people and say, hey, this is what we have to work with. You need to try to, fix people's contracts. And then after that, the last goal would be to raise money. And then the actual structure of it for me, like if I'm a GM, I would want to have a little finance team just so that we have the numbers figured out. I would want to have some type of a fundraising team. I don't know how realistic or feasible that is. But then we've got two separate teams. Team A is just about high school. So I said from the time that the players are in 8th grade or from the time that they're leaving 8th grade, you want to be able to put together like a profile of these players, follow them very closely. And then you want to be able to pass that info off to Team B. There's only focusing on college players. So now they've got a profile of hey, these are the guys that we like coming out of high school, because the transfer portal gives and it takes away. So that's how I kind of drew things up, just like a 50-foot, a 50,000 foot overview look at it. But does any of this make any sense, or do you think that I'm off?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I think I would say a lot of them, I think pretty much everything that you've outlined here is, to me, extremely important in this role. And I say extremely important to being organized within this role. At the end of the day, for me, there's certain things that are maybe or less unforeseen, but at the end of the day, I think did you have a thought process about it, is what I always ask people at the end of the day. It's like, man, well, certain things are going to happen. Was like, did you have any sort of thought process on, if it did happen, then this is what I think. Well, I think A or I think B. And to me, it's not so much, okay, your thought process is correct, your thought process is incorrect. It's like, okay, well, sitting here and thinking about it, this is how you feel. This is what deciphered in your mind from the information that you've gathered. To me, is extremely important at the end of the day. And I think being able to get out in front of things is what I tell people. Proactively. That's why you see a lot of people who are gaining these roles. A lot of people are getting hired in these roles, or you look at the Belichick and the staffs he's hired to kind of run that for him. Extremely unique on that front versus how Texas is running it with Brandon Harris and a lot of those guys over there. They're probably operating totally different. All two completely different systems. You look at how a lot of these programs are doing it. It's just they're totally different. So it's based purely on the ideology of like what that coach may have, what he may feel, what he thinks is most important. So it's like I said, man, it's unique, man. It's a unique role at the end of the day. And there's 131, it's been done 131 different ways. I'm sure there's a lot of similarities, but like no head coach is alike at the end of the day. So it's so unique, man. I wish I could be a fly on the wall in some of these rooms.
I don't know if you're ready to, or if you have something else, Bull, you want to get into. But I was ready to hear about some of the, working with some of these coaches, some of the, just the vibe, like, maybe you had some stories, or just kind of what is it like you work with Saban? I think you were with him his last year, weren't you? Before he retired.
His last year, man.
What the heck is he like working with him? And did he ever come down on you?
Man, I tell people one time I did a good job, a really good job, actually. I say I did an elite job of kind of staying out of the wrath of that, But that was one time which is actually really unique, man. Is we always doing recruiting visits, official visits for high school prospects. We always would go to his house on it was always, we would go to his house always on Saturday night after dinner of karaoke night. And we would always go to back to his house Sunday morning for breakfast, and karaoke night was one interesting.
Would he be singing? Like he be up there?
No, he never did. No, he was like the judge. He was like the judge, the jury, and the executioner.
Okay.
And the thing was always, never be too good, because you too good, he makes you go every week. If you're not good enough, he makes you go every week. I was like, man, like it was like, man, like how do I fall in between this thing? But I was one of those guys, man. Unfortunately, man, I think I had a little too much fun with it, so I had to go every week because I was
man.
that worked out. So yeah, man, we would always go to his house for breakfast on Sunday, man. And this is probably the only time I've ever seen him actually like really jump me for something, man. Is he's got some nephews, or nephews and nieces, obviously, but he has this little wiffle ball and a little wiffle ball bat, man. You know, this guy's guy's multi-millionaire. But he's got this old wiffle ball, man. This old wiffle ball bat, you know, and it's just very nice thing to do. And I guess it was his grandsons, his grandsons actually. And man, you know, we would always play basketball, drive the golf carts around the lane he has down to the lake. And you know, we came back and we were shooting basketball, and we had to recruit there, man. And you know, we were talking about baseball. Kid was a big time baseball player, and he had this wiffle ball bat. And he picked it up, and he was getting ready to pitch it to me, man. And I hit it, you know, pretty far. And when I tell you, he lost it, dog. He lost it.
Oh man, hold on.
Yeah, you'd thought I'd put it in my pocket and tried to walk out of his house.
Dang.
He completely lost it, man.
What?
Wow.
Yeah. So
That is funny.
those moments like that, man, or you know, he was always big on it. Which he told the story at the draft, which is interesting, man. So he was a big fan of Mason Taylor. Obviously was a huge Jason Taylor guy, man, during his time in Miami. You know, talks all the time about how Jason helped him. You know, he kind of alludes his on the Pivot podcast with Ryan Clark and those guys, of how him, you know, when he was at Miami, he had guys like Jason Taylor who really helped him be a better coach, really helped him connect with the locker room, helped get a lot of problems solved that he felt he needed players' help on. You know, so he was huge. He was really tight with Jason Taylor, man. So obviously with Mason being, you know, Jason's son, and you know, that kid was a highly recruited football player at St. Thomas Aquinas High School, right here in Florida, actually. Coach wanted him to come to Alabama. You know, I don't think they, and I don't know what the details around it or anything like that. You know, obviously couldn't get it done. So anytime, you know, there was a recruit that he liked that maybe someone wasn't gung ho about, or maybe we weren't, you know, maybe the kid hadn't told us, you know, I'll do anything in my power to get to Alabama, and he really loved the kid, you know. So anytime that happened, he always brought up the Mason Taylor deal, man. He's like, listen, you know, like I told you how good this guy was, and you guys don't believe it, but what do I know? He would always say that. And it was always hilarious, man, because you're sitting there and you're like, man, like, you know, you're sitting here working with a legend, but at that point, you're working with so many other legendary, quote unquote, legendary people in the room, and then you also just become one of the guys in the room, man. At the end of the day, so you know, it's, you know, he's sitting there going off, and I'm, you know, me and Charlie Strong just sitting there, just kind of looking at each other. That Edinburgh kind of just looking at each other.
That was hilarious, man.
So man, it was from that standpoint, man, I think it was phenomenal. Just being able to be around him, man. Obviously, one of the greatest coaches to ever do it, the greatest coach to ever do it, in my opinion. Phenomenal leader. But just like I gave credit to, you know, being able to work with such an elite group that I work with now, I think that's one thing that I can say that was a blessing about what Coach Saban built at Alabama too, was just a plethora of people there. You know, even during my time there, you know, like I said, you know, guys like Charlie Strong, Derek Dooley, Ken Wisenhunt, you know, then you got a lot of these really elite up and coming people, Tommy Reese, you know, Tavares Robinson, you know, all these other phenomenal Freddie Roach, you know, Robert Gillespie, you know, played at Florida. And then, you know, and that's just from a, man, you know, I could sit here and rattle off tons and tons of names, you know, names that people may not even really know and understand their impact on college football. If I'm being totally honest, and you think about support staff we even had too, you know, people like Ashley Kimball, Kerrigan Johnson, Ellis, man, Denzel Ball, Clint Dix, man, Josh
Mhm.
Chapman, like
Mhm.
it really extends to every, I think even you know, like the guy who's over our medical team, man, is like arguably one of the best in I mean, he's probably the best in the country. He was there entire time with Saban. Man, you see that guy in pictures, like, man, there's like, I'm sports health people, like everybody, man, and I know obviously I can't name everybody, but I think everybody in the building who ever touched anything there should feel the love, truth be told.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well
facts.
done.
So let me try to wrap it up here. Real quick. I have a couple of questions for you because you would be part of going out finding the high school players and all of that. One of the questions that a lot of people are asking as fans is how much do y'all look at the on threes and the rivals and the well, actually, I think that on three might have just bought rivals, but the
Yeah.
24/7 sports and all of that. How
And
much yeah, like are y'all looking at that or what?
Man, yes and no. Yes and no. I think we're scraping every single every outlet, excuse me. We're screening every single outlet that we probably possibly can to be able to find a name on a prospect or some type of information that we can for sure. The problem what I say is that with those deals is not really a problem, but I mean, if you look at just a blanket 247 rivals page, it may give you the top 250 players in a said class across multiple positions, which means like, hey, that may be what 20, 25 players per position.
Yeah.
Maybe
Maybe.
like you really can't live off that. That's not enough to live off of, if I'm being totally honest. And then you look at the state to state rankings, obviously sometimes it's a good way to get information, but you know, we utilize so many other tools outside of that one specifically that I think we would use to get information from or use to like quote unquote find prospects that was rather than we would just really live off that. I think sometimes that's a good way to, late in the process, late in the deal, sometimes maybe a kid will formulate on one of those things. But, by the time if he's found by one of those outlets, typically like multiple schools kind of already know about him. So I would say that that's not really something we live off of. If I'm being totally honest, I think to me, it almost serves as a fan page in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Which is great. I've got tons of good people who I know work at 247, who I know work at on three man, and they're great people. And I think they're really elite at what they do. And I think they understand that too. A lot of times they call us to try and get information on a player to put on that site. So it's a working relationship at the end of the day.
Yeah, man. So last question for me. It's just gonna be with everything that is changing with NIL, with the house settlement and all of that. What's one of the things that coaches are talking about that they want to see changed the most?
Um,
Whether that's transfer
like,
portal, whether that's NIL, salary cap.
Good question, man. I think for me, I think that I mean you kind of alluded to it. Maybe I wasn't thinking it going this way, but I think transfer portal for sure.
Mm.
I think a lot of coaches have, maybe not so much in the building I work in now, but just been in the industry is someone who came up as the transfer portal was being created. You got a lot of coaches who have been coaching 30 years before the transfer portal ever existed. And then you got some that have been coaching, maybe 5 or 6 years and then are in the transfer portal period and now have been triaging it for maybe a good period of time. So I think that's one thing that you definitely see is, man, a lot of coaches just the periods at which the transfer portal occur and how they ultimately affect your roster. I think is the biggest thing. You put you talk about the transfer portal window being placed right after the season is over when it's like causing a ton of bowl game opt-outs, things like that. Guys want to get in the portal. You know, obviously like when coaches are leaving or being fired, obviously, that kind of handicaps the next coach walking in. When he's lost his entire roster, it's a double-edged sword to it. If you talk about two transfer portal periods, having one right there in December and having this one that actually just closed on the 25th of last month. You talking about having to possibly lose 6 or 7 guys, maybe potential starters, and having to refill them, or you have literally no other window at all to get those guys back. So that's been extremely tough. So I think the transfer portal is, like, to me, one thing for sure that's probably, like, right now needs the most triaging in college football for sure.
Cool.
I agree, 100%, man. That's some great stuff, man. I think that's really that's in my opinion too. I'm not in the industry, but in my opinion too, I think that's the biggest issue. Like, you look
Yeah.
at what happened with Tennessee, for example, with Nico leaving. Like the fact that he could leave when he left,
Yeah.
like, it just puts everybody. It puts him in a bad spot. Puts Tennessee in a bad spot. It puts,
Yeah.
you know what I
You
mean?
know,
It just makes no
yeah.
sense. You know
No
what I'm saying?
doubt, man. And I think about it from the kids' aspect too, man. I always know, we're all former players. Me and you played together, man. And we always understand that, like, hey, okay, it is the best thing for the student athlete. And sometimes the student athlete's not, and maybe not even just Nico, like his situation's in the spotlight. But there's a
Right.
billion situations like this. So it's just, I think having informed representation around you is important. Whoever that may be, professional, non-professional, like, just guidance, whatever it is, man. So I think that's important.
Cool. Hey, Hart, thank you so much, brother.
No doubt. I appreciate y'all for having me on, man.
Appreciate you, bro. Be easy, man.
Be easy. How's y'all?
Thanks for watching, and please make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, because that keeps us growing inside of the YouTube algorithm. And if you did like this video, here's another one that you might also enjoy. Thank you. We'll see you on the next one. Peace.